Remember when having a US passport felt like a golden key? Like you could walk through almost any airport, smile at the officer, get a stamp, and boom, vacation, new job, or even a new life started. But that feeling? It's fading fast. In 2025, something is changing. Quietly, slowly, but definitely. A growing number of countries are starting to say, "Not so fast, America." Some are slapping on stricter visa rules. Some are tightening residency requirements. Others are simply making life harder for Americans living abroad, enough to push them out without saying the words directly. This isn't about anger or revenge. It's not about politics on the surface. It's deeper, a mix of rising housing costs, overcrowded cities, economic stress, and a growing feeling that American visitors aren't always the guests they used to be. In some places, Americans are seen as part of the problem, not the solution. Let's start with a country that used to feel like an extension of home. Number 1, Canada. For decades, Canada was Plan B for many Americans. Peaceful cities, free healthcare, fresh air, friendly people. Moving there almost felt easy. But in 2025, that door isn't closing completely, but it's not wide open anymore either. Canada has raised the bar. If you're an American applying for a visa or permanent residency, chances are higher than ever that you'll get rejected. In fact, the rejection rate jumped nearly 20% this year compared to a few years ago. And it's not just about paperwork, it's about pressure. Canadian cities like Vancouver and Toronto are facing major housing shortages. Home prices have gone through the roof. In places like Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island, locals are protesting Americans buying up homes as vacation spots. One year, lakefront homes were a dream. Next, they became a battleground. Why? Because the locals feel like they're being priced out, and they blame Americans with remote jobs and US dollars to spend. Even Canadian politics is changing. A recent poll showed that most Canadians now support stronger border checks for US citizens. There's fear that American-style politics, especially after recent elections, is starting to spill over the border. People are worried. People are pushing back. What's more, even Americans who've already settled in Canada are starting to feel the shift. Visa renewals are being delayed. Some long-term residents are getting denied, even when they've married Canadians. The message is subtle but clear. We're not as open as we used to be. So, if you're dreaming of a quiet cabin in the woods or a cozy life in Montreal, think twice. Canada hasn't slammed the door, but the red carpet is definitely rolled up. Number 2, Mexico. From beach towns like Tulum to cities like Mexico City, more than 1.6 million Americans now call Mexico home. It's warm, it's cheaper, and the lifestyle looks amazing online. But what you don't see in those sunny Instagram posts is the tension building just beneath the surface. Rent has doubled in popular areas. Locals are being forced out of their own neighborhoods. And guess who's getting the blame? Americans. Especially remote workers and retirees who are moving in without really becoming part of the local economy. In 2025, Mexico's government responded by tightening the rules. Immigration officers are cracking down. Americans who overstay tourist visas, something that used to be ignored, are now being deported at the highest rate since 2005. Some were pulled straight from Airbnb rentals. Others were stopped at airports during random checks. And this crackdown isn't just about rules. It's about frustration. In some neighborhoods, you'll find signs that say things like, "This is not your playground." Locals are demanding stronger rent control laws and asking the government to protect families being pushed out by rising costs. In Oaxaca, a small cafe made headlines for putting up a sign that said, "Americans pay double." Some called it discrimination. Others called it resistance. Either way, the message is out there. Not everyone is happy to see Americans anymore. Even Americans who are playing by the rules are feeling the shift. It's getting harder to renew temporary visas. It's harder to get work permits. And with elections coming up in both countries, you can bet immigration will stay in the spotlight. The party isn't over in Mexico. But if you're an American hoping to move there and live cheap, the vibe in 2025 is different. The country isn't saying get out, but it's no longer saying mi casa es su casa either. And that's just 2 countries. 13 more are feeling the same way, some in Europe, others in Asia, even a few surprising ones that used to beg Americans to come. So we've already seen how Canada and Mexico, 2 of America's closest neighbors, are changing their tone. But what about across the Atlantic? Surely Europe still welcomes Americans with open arms, right? Not exactly. Number 3, Germany. Let's talk about Germany, a country once known for offering Americans a clean, efficient, and opportunity-filled life. Cities like Berlin and Munich used to attract U.S. workers, students, artists, and entrepreneurs. People went for the free education, great healthcare, and a better work-life balance. But in 2025, Germany is no longer easy to move to, especially if you're an American. What changed? Germany tightened its immigration rules. Hard. Getting a freelance visa, which used to be the golden ticket for digital workers, now requires proof of steady contracts from German companies, a good grasp of the German language, and several months of savings in your bank account. Even students are feeling the squeeze. Public universities, which were once open and free for many international students, are now cutting spots and prioritizing EU citizens instead. And then there's the housing crisis. Rents in Berlin and Frankfurt have exploded, in some places, by over 40% since 2020. Locals are fed up, and Americans are being blamed for adding pressure to already packed housing markets. Politicians are responding by supporting stricter foreign ownership laws and tighter rental regulations. But maybe the biggest shock for Americans isn't the paperwork, it's the cultural adjustment. Germany runs on structure, discipline, and long bureaucratic processes. You don't just figure it out later. You figure it out before you arrive. Miss a step, and you might get denied or delayed for months. It's frustrating, especially for Americans who expect faster service or a little flexibility. Germany isn't pushing Americans out, but it is making them work much harder to stay in. Number 4, the United Kingdom. You'd think the US and UK would always have a special relationship. Same language, similar culture, strong alliance. But in 2025, the welcome for Americans has become a lot colder. It started after Brexit. Once the UK left the European Union, it began rewriting its immigration rules. And guess what? Americans didn't get any special treatment. If anything, they got left behind. Now, it's harder to get a work visa. Financial requirements are higher. Even getting a student visa is more difficult, and tuition for Americans has soared. Scholarships for international students? Cut. The National Health Service, which once made the UK feel like a healthcare heaven, is overwhelmed. Long wait times, underfunding, and a shortage of doctors have made the NHS a system under pressure. For American retirees hoping for affordable care, it's not the dream it used to be. And don't forget about cost of living. London is now one of the most expensive cities in the world. The average rent for a tiny flat is over £2,500 a month. And if you move out to smaller towns, things get cheaper but also lonelier. Fewer services, fewer jobs, and almost no American expat community. But beyond the economics, there's also a shift in attitude. British culture values privacy, politeness, and understatement. Americans, who are used to being loud, expressive, and outgoing, often feel out of place. Some expats joke that it took them a year just to get a neighbor to say hello. That's not just culture shock. That's emotional isolation. Add to that a growing resentment over American influence in media, in politics, even in business, and suddenly, being an American in the UK doesn't feel so special anymore. Now, let's head to a country that's long been the dream for so many Americans. Number 5, Italy. Ask almost anyone, and they'll tell you they've fantasized about moving to Italy. The food, the scenery, the lifestyle.
A villa in Tuscany.
A sunset in Rome. A coffee in Florence. But in 2025, the romantic dream of Italy is running into a harsh reality check. Italy has started making it much harder for Americans to move there. Long-term visas now require higher income levels. You have to prove you can support yourself, often with savings well above what most people expect. The popular elective residence visa, which used to be the way many American retirees moved in, has been quietly restricted. Local Italians are also pushing back. Cities like Florence and Venice have seen huge numbers of foreigners buy up properties, many turning them into arents. This has driven locals out and caused massive protests. Florence even passed new laws to limit short-term rentals. Venice charges tourists to enter the city during peak seasons. The message is clear. This isn't a theme park, and they're tired of being treated like one. The government bureaucracy doesn't help either. Italy's systems are slow, confusing, and different in every region. People spend months chasing documents, dealing with missing files, and trying to get their codice fiscale, a basic ID number. And unless you speak fluent Italian, even getting through the post office can turn into a 2-hour headache. Living in Italy still has its magic. The wine, the warmth, the beauty. But for Americans in 2025, the red tape is thicker, the patience thinner, and the path far more difficult than the movies ever show. Number 6. Turkey. For years, Turkey was the quiet favorite of American travelers and expats. A place where East meets West, where you could sip coffee in a mosque-lined city like Istanbul one day and relax on the Mediterranean coast the next. Rent was cheap. Food was amazing. Life felt good. But in 2025, things have changed. The Turkish government has tightened its rules. It's harder to get a residency permit, and even harder to renew one. Some Americans who've lived there for years are suddenly being told, "Sorry, you have 30 days to leave." What's behind this shift?
Part of it is politics.
Relations between the U.S. and Turkey have grown tense over the years, with disagreements about NATO, Syria, and weapons sales. That tension trickles down. National pride is rising in Turkey, and many locals and politicians feel like it's time to take back control of their culture and economy. Foreigners, especially Americans, are being watched more closely. Some American teachers have been fired without explanation. Others have had their homes inspected. Things that wouldn't raise eyebrows in other countries, like attending protests or sharing certain posts online, can lead to unexpected problems in Turkey. The media is also tightly controlled. Journalists, even foreign ones, face major restrictions. And if you're a regular American living there, teaching, working remotely, or just enjoying the culture, you may start to feel a little more watched than welcomed. Yet even now, Turkey has a strange pull. The culture is rich. The people, especially outside the big cities, are still incredibly warm. But the country's rules have changed. And for Americans, it's no longer just a place to enjoy. It's a place where you need to move carefully, or you could end up being asked to leave before you're ready. Number 7. China. Once upon a time, China was a dream destination for Americans looking for adventure, jobs, and opportunity. Cities like Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen felt like the future. Fast-paced, modern, booming. You could teach English, launch a startup, or work for a global tech giant and live like a king.
But now,
China has become one of the most difficult and dangerous countries for Americans to live in. Let's start with the obvious: politics. Relations between the U.S. and China have gotten worse. Trade wars, tech bans, spy accusations, the list goes on. And with every new clash between the two governments, it's the regular people, especially expats, who feel the pressure. In 2025, it's much harder to get a work visa. Rules change constantly. Companies are now hiring fewer foreigners. In some cases, Americans are being passed over even when they're qualified because hiring a local is just safer and easier. But that's not the scariest part. Many Americans living in China say they've been followed,
watched,
even questioned by authorities for small things, like joining a language exchange group or writing a blog post. Some have had their visa renewals denied with no reason given. Others were asked to leave within days. And don't forget the tech. Apps like Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube are blocked. If you want to use them, you'll need a VPN, and even those are getting harder to use. Your phone, your internet use, even your movement around the city, it's all watched. You might not notice it right away, but over time, it starts to feel like a cage. COVID changed a lot too. China's zero-COVID policies were some of the strictest in the world. Full lockdowns, metal barriers. People trapped inside apartment buildings for weeks with no warning. That kind of memory doesn't fade quickly, especially for foreigners who felt completely powerless during it all. The result? Many Americans who once loved living in China are leaving. Not because they want to, but because they feel they have to. Number 8. Cuba. For decades, Cuba has been a mystery. A land of classic cars, beautiful beaches, and a complicated relationship with the United States. There were years where things started to improve. Travel was easier, flights increased, and Americans started to visit in large numbers. But in 2025, we're heading in the other direction. Travel restrictions are back. Direct flights have been cut. Visa processes are longer. And Americans who've been living in Cuba, many of them retirees, digital nomads, or even people with Cuban family, are facing tougher requirements to stay. But there's more. Cuba is struggling.
Badly.
The economy is hurting. There are fuel shortages. Medicine is hard to find. Even food is becoming scarce in many areas. Power outages are common. For Americans used to stability and convenience, life in Cuba now feels like a daily challenge. Internet is limited. Many popular websites are blocked. It's hard to send money from the US to Cuba due to sanctions. Even basic banking can be a nightmare. And if you speak out or say the wrong thing, you might get a visit from someone in uniform. Still, many Americans stay because they love the people, the culture, the history. But even the most loyal expats are starting to say the same thing. It's not safe anymore. And more than a few are quietly packing their bags and heading home. That's what we're seeing more and more in 2025. The places Americans used to escape to for peace, for freedom, for a fresh start, are now becoming harder to stay in. Number 9. Venezuela. There was a time when Venezuela was one of the richest countries in Latin America. Oil money flowed like water. Cities like Caracas were full of life, and Americans came to work, invest, or live with their Venezuelan families. But today, Venezuela is a country in survival mode. Hyperinflation has turned the currency into something almost useless. A loaf of bread can cost a week's salary. Store shelves are often empty. There are fuel shortages. Medicine is hard to find. Blackouts happen regularly, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. Yet, believe it or not, some Americans still live there. A few are aid workers. Some are married to locals. Others have stayed for years, holding on to a life they built before everything started falling apart. But in 2025, even they are being pushed to their limit. Relations between the US and Venezuela are at a low point. The Maduro government sees American influence as a threat. That means anyone with a US passport can be viewed with suspicion, even long-time residents. Visa renewals are being denied. Some Americans have been questioned or even detained. The U.S. State Department now warns, do not travel. In some parts of Venezuela, simply speaking English in public can make you stand out. Carrying an American passport can make you a target. And if something goes wrong, there may not be anyone to help. Still, some Americans stay. They say the local people are kind. They've built deep relationships. And life, even in chaos, can still have moments of beauty. But living in Venezuela in 2025 isn't just hard. It's a test of strength, sacrifice, and sometimes survival. Number 10. North Korea. This one probably doesn't surprise you. North Korea has never welcomed Americans with open arms. But in 2025, things are even more closed than before. Technically, it's not completely impossible for an American to go there. But you'd need special permission from both the US and North Korean governments, and even then, the risks are huge. Very few Americans have ever lived in North Korea, mostly humanitarian workers, professors, or religious volunteers. But even those people live under constant surveillance. Every phone call is monitored. Every step is watched. You can't move freely. You can't speak openly. And you can't make a mistake. One wrong move. Even something as simple as taking a photo of the wrong building can land you in prison. Or worse. Remember Otto Warmbier? The American college student arrested in North Korea in 2016 for allegedly taking a poster off a wall? He came back to the US in a coma and died shortly after. That case changed everything. Since 2017, the U.S. government has banned ordinary citizens from traveling to North Korea. That ban is still in place today. In 2025, it's extended again, and for good reason.
Tensions are high.
Missile tests have resumed, and diplomatic talks are frozen. For Americans, North Korea is not just unwelcome, it's off-limits. Number 11, Russia. Just a few years ago, Americans still traveled to Russia. Some moved there for work or love or adventure. Moscow and St. Petersburg had growing expat communities. But then everything changed. After the war in Ukraine, after sanctions, after political crackdowns, the U.S.-Russia relationship collapsed. And so did the safety net for Americans living there. In 2025, Russia is not a place where Americans are wanted. Visa rules have tightened. The U.S. Embassy staff has been cut to the bone. American journalists, students, and business people have been told to leave, and many have. If you're an American in Russia today, you're under watch. You may be questioned.
You may be accused of being a spy.
And if you get in trouble, help is almost impossible to find. Travel advisories from the U.S. government are very clear. Do not go. Leave if you're already there. It's not about tourism anymore. It's about safety, survival, knowing when it's time to walk away, even from a life you've built. Number 12, Iran. Iran has a rich culture, ancient cities, and millions of kind, thoughtful people. But its relationship with the United States has been broken for decades. And in 2025, that break feels sharper than ever. American citizens have been arrested and jailed in Iran, often without clear reason. Dual citizens are especially at risk. You could be visiting family, doing charity work, or just sightseeing, and still end up in prison. You don't have to do anything wrong. You just have to be American. The Iranian government sees the U.S. as a hostile power. And when tensions rise, like they are now, American visitors become pawns in a bigger game. The U.S. government has issued repeated warnings about travel to Iran. The message is clear: don't go. It's not safe. Even if you admire the country's history and beauty, going there in 2025 isn't an adventure. It's a risk, one that could change your life forever. Number 13, Belarus. Most Americans probably couldn't point to Belarus on a map. But it used to be one of the few countries in Eastern Europe where Americans could travel without a visa, at least for short visits. Now, that door has basically slammed shut. In 2021, the Belarusian government removed the U.S. from its visa-free entry list. That might sound like a small change, but it was a sign of something bigger. Since then, relations have gotten worse. In 2025, it's not just harder for Americans to enter Belarus, it's more dangerous. Earlier this year, a 27-year-old American reportedly tried crossing into Belarus by train and was immediately detained for illegal entry. No violence.
No protest.
Just wrong place, wrong passport. Since then, reports have surfaced of Americans being followed, questioned, or denied entry without explanation. If you're an American planning to visit Belarus now, be prepared for long screenings, zero embassy help, and a legal system that doesn't work the way you expect. It's not an outright ban, but it's a warning. You're not wanted here. Number 14, Afghanistan. You already know the situation there is complicated. After the U.S. withdrawal in 2021 and the return of the Taliban to power, the country has changed drastically. But even now, a handful of American citizens are still inside, mostly aid workers, journalists, or people with deep family ties. But in 2025, the message couldn't be clearer. Americans should leave.
Now.
The U.S. Embassy is gone. There are no services, no backup, no one to help if things go wrong. The Taliban has made some statements about letting NGOs and charities operate, but that promise doesn't always hold up on the ground. Checkpoints are everywhere. Rules change daily. And if you're American, you may be seen as suspicious, even hostile, no matter what your intentions are. Travel advisories from the U.S. State Department are at their highest level. Many major aid organizations have already pulled their staff out. If you're still there, you're on your own. This isn't just about politics. It's about real danger. the kind you can't talk your way out of. And finally, let's end in a place that once seemed like the perfect European dream. Number 15, Portugal. This one might surprise you. Portugal was a haven for Americans looking for a new start, especially remote workers, digital nomads, and retirees. The weather's beautiful. The cost of living used to be affordable. The pace of life? Peaceful. For years, Portugal invited foreigners in. They even had something called the Golden Visa, which let people invest in real estate to gain residency. But not anymore. In 2025, Portugal officially ended the Golden Visa program.
Why?
Because the housing crisis became too big to ignore. Rents in Lisbon and Porto skyrocketed. Locals were being forced out of their neighborhoods by wealthy foreigners, many of them American. The government acted fast. New rules, new taxes, and a freeze on short-term rental licenses in major cities. Even the once popular digital nomad visa is under pressure. There are stricter income requirements, longer wait times, and more paperwork than ever before. Local sentiment has shifted too. People are starting to speak up, in the news, on social media, at town halls. The message? We're not a playground for rich tourists. That doesn't mean Americans are banned. But the vibe has changed. You're still allowed to visit. You can still enjoy the beaches, the food, the culture. But don't assume you'll be welcomed with open arms, especially if you're planning to stay long-term. So, what does all this mean? Why is the world saying no to Americans in 2025? It's not because every country suddenly hates the US. It's because the world is changing. Countries are facing massive pressure. Housing shortages, political unrest, culture clashes, climate migration, and economic pain. And in many of these places, Americans are seen as part of the problem. Driving up rent. Ignoring local laws. Bringing baggage, sometimes political, sometimes literal, that makes life harder for the people already living there. And here's the hardest truth. A US passport used to open doors automatically. Now, more and more, it comes with questions. If you're American in 2025 and you want to live abroad, work abroad, retire abroad, you can. But you'll need to earn it now. You'll need to prove yourself. You'll need to listen more, expect less, and understand that being a guest means honoring the host. Because the age of automatic welcome is over. And the new question is, where can Americans still go and truly feel at home? If you found this video eye-opening, make sure to subscribe for more global stories that the mainstream media often skips. Hit the like button if you learned something new, and drop a comment below. Let us know what surprised you the most, or where you think Americans are still truly welcome in 2025.